Hi, I'm KS Garner, and you're listening to the Solo Nerdwood podcast. Today, I'll be speaking with the creator and author of the webcomic Poppy, The Girl Who Slept in 100 Years, Matthew Senn, here to promote the webcomics upcoming Kickstarter. Welcome, Matthew.
Hi, thanks for having me here. It's good to be here.
Well, thank you for joining us today. But outside my introduction, who is Matthew Senn in his own words?
So I'm by trade, I'm a 2D animator. And on the side, I do comics. I do the art and the story. So I write and draw and pretty much do everything myself. I get some help with editing, but other than that, it's a one-man show for the most part. Um, yeah. So I don't know how do you want to hear the whole story?
Yeah, sure. I'm like, this is your time. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, so I've been doing comics for a number of years now. I've been doing it ever since I could hold, a crayon in my hand as a baby. Just loving to draw. And then, I was doing, pencil on paper stuff in school. But then I really got serious about it right after I graduated high school. And my first comic that I actually did get published was called Quiet, a graphic novel of introversion, which was based on my own experiences in school, being very, shy and an outcast and not having many friends. So I channeled that into a creative outlet, and it really seemed to do well and resonate with a lot of people. So I've continued to do comics since then, mostly indie stuff, one shots, short stories, things like that. Now I've gotten onto webtoons, and I've got Poppy, which has become quite popular. I think it's probably my most popular work yet, which is great. And so yeah, that's what I'm focusing all my time on right now, and I think it's been a worthwhile endeavor.
Mm-hmm. So, what is Poppy, the Girl Who Slept in 100 Years webcomic about? I mean, obviously she slept in 100 years, but like, what is it really about?
Yeah, so like you said from the title, she slept in 100 years. So she's a teenage girl from the 1920s. The flapper type, very upbeat and very of the times. It's the jazz age. She sleeps in 100 years and wakes up in modern day, the 2020s, which is a much different world than what she's used to, but she keeps that joyful attitude and that heart. And then she goes, back to her school and makes new friends, and then learns, tries to find out what happened to her family and kind of navigate her way through while still keeping a smile. So that's really what's at the heart of it, is seeing juxtaposing the 1920s and the 2020s and comparing and contrasting, because there's a lot more to them than you might think.
Uh-huh. So, could you just elaborate a little bit more on the creative process on Poppy, the Girl Who Slept in 100 Years as a whole, from working on it as a webcomic to now publishing it through, or at least getting the funds through Kickstarter?
Yeah, so it started just about a year ago now. I can't believe it's only been that short. It feels like I've been working on it forever. Um, and I sort of got inspired by old comics from the 50s, like Archie and a few other ones, and just sort of observing that art style. I really enjoyed that, like, pulpy paper look, the colors, the misaligned from the line art, those dots everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I started trying to recreate that digitally, and just as a fun experiment. And I really started to like it, and I thought, well, gee, what if there was a character who looked like this walking around against modern characters, and it evolved from there. And so and yeah, keeping that idea of 1920s versus 2020s, that's kind of influencing every creative decision in that front there. And I think excuse me. So yeah, so for the creative process of that, it's keeping that in mind helps a lot. And I always wanted it to be that old newspaper comic style, 4 panels, and you update it about every day, which is pretty close to what I've been doing. I've been uploading every other month. So you get like a batch of strips, and then we take a break, and then you get another batch, and that's worked out for me pretty well so far. And I had been reading a lot of webtoons, the last couple of years, and I thought that might be a good platform to try it out on, and it sure as heck was. It's been getting very popular on there. So now, to try and get it even closer to the newspaper comic style, we're trying to be printing a physical book of Poppy through the Kickstarter. That's what our goal is, to raise funds to do a printing of a book you can hold in your hands. I get a lot of comments and people saying that the comic reminds them of reading newspaper comics. Like either they're old enough to remember actually reading them, or they remember reading the books with their grandparents, things like Calvin and Hobbes and Garfield, or things like that, and it brings back sort of nostalgia for them. I think a physical book would go a long way to help recreate that feeling.
So what have you noticed that's changed about Poppy the webcomic that you weren't expecting, or things that have come up? You mentioned earlier about how popular it became, and then how it's being translated now into different languages, and you're saying it's like the most popular thing you've ever really put out there. So how is that? When did you notice that this was becoming a lot bigger than you thought it was going to be?
So it debuted last July, and of course I was just sharing it with all my friends and any platform I had. So it had a bit of a start there, but nothing too spectacular. And then I think I don't have any 100% confirmation of this, but just the way the time latches up. This is my theory. Is I got back in touch with my old animation professor, and we had been talking for a bit, and then I was talking about what I was working on at the time of Poppy, and he's like, "Oh, that'd be really cool. Send it my way, and I'll share it with the current students at the college there." And that's what he did, and I think that's what helped spark it, because right after he did that, I saw the numbers go up and up and up, and it start to kind of snowball, and then it got featured on their front page of like up and coming comics, and then it really exploded. So. And that was right around the time I was putting out a storyline where it was touching on some more sensitive subjects of modern society, because when I wrote it, there was like 10 people reading it. I was like, I'm just going to write what I want, that's fair. And then, it's suddenly there's 1,000 people reading it, and I'm about to put out one that could be, pretty hot button issue. And I'm like, oh, geez, I don't know. But I went, I went through with it anyway, and it got well received. And after that moment, I went, okay, I've created a character that's charming and beloved enough. We can touch upon some certain topics, and people will still enjoy it. But ever since then, I've always been careful of, okay, this is a very family friendly, comic for all ages. Of course, I want to reach as many as I can. So I'm always careful of deciding what we're gonna put in there, not to betray any creative decisions that way, but because if I have a topic I want to tackle, I'm gonna tackle it. It's just, how do we want to address it, right? So that's been, in terms of the popularity, got to be careful what you say online, of course, but in terms of, you mentioned the translations, which is another just completely unexpected part of it, gaining popularity. I posted around on Webtoons, and also some different sites, Instagram and Tapas and all that. And it's kind of a funny story. I got a message in December from this guy. I had no clue who he was, and he was just asking, like, can I ask you some questions about Webtoon? And I was like, oh, it might be up and coming creator. He wants to get some advice. I'm like, yeah, sure. And then he just didn't reply for like 2 months. And I was just like, okay, whatever. And then he finally got back to me, and he's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize you replied. And I'm like, no worries. What's up? And it turns out he was from France and wanted to translate the comic into French. He wanted to offer his services as a freelance translator to translate the comic. And I was like, that's crazy. Like, sure, we can, work something out. He was a bit more familiar with that sort of process than me. because there's some processes and tools Webtoon provides to allow fans to translate the comics. But because of the way Poppy is, especially with her speech balloons being textured and hand drawn, it was extremely difficult to use that in order to actually like edit the comic and translate it over. Not to mention, I told him like this is a very, it's slang heavy. Like it's hard enough to read in English because she's using outdated slang. There's a lot of wordplay. I love puns. There's all sorts of things, cultural references that just, I don't know what a French audience is going to get out of that. So it's going to be a lot of hard work. But he was, he was ready to go. So he wanted to do it. So we wrote up an agreement, and I shared with him the original file so that it'd be easier to edit. And we've gone on with the editing process. And then another person got in touch with me, and this time it was an Italian lady from the University of Venice who said she's doing her degree on language, and she wants to do her thesis on my comic. And I was just blown away. And her thesis in particular was, well, how would you translate a comic like that into Italian? And I'm like, yeah, that's a very good question considering we're about to do it. So, so yeah, I gave her a full interview, and yeah, so she took it and she actually, analyzed everything and broke it down within her thesis there of what the comic is and how these jokes work, completely destroying the jokes in the process, but beautifully dissected, in the most academic way possible. It's great. It's great. And then she actually did translate a few strips, and she chose some of the most difficult ones in the comic to translate. And I was very impressed. And by the time that she had actually finished her thesis and submitted it and shared it with me, I was like, yeah, sure enough, there's some techniques in there that we actually did decide to use, and some jokes that got translated the exact same way. Like not exactly because Italian and French and all that, but the process of it was the exact same. So I was like, okay, we're on the right track. And so she graduated in April, top marks with honors. So congrats to her. And shortly after she had originally got in touch with me, another person got in touch with me, this time from Brazil, asking if she could translate it into Brazilian Portuguese. And so I'm just like, okay, well, because they are offering their services, and I can't exactly afford to pay you right now. Let's do a Kickstarter and raise some money, and let's raise some funds for these translations. So that's the other part of this Kickstarter, is going to be a physical book as well as the translations.
Well, do you see, well, I don't know how it works on Webtoons, but can you see where your audiences are coming from? Are you getting French and Italian and, Brazilian readers?
Unfortunately, no, I haven't been able to gain that sort of insight on the Webtoon platform. I have on other platforms such as Facebook. I do see quite a bit of Brazilian interaction there. And then Instagram and other websites, I'm able to get a bit more of a look. But with Webtoon, yeah, it's not as much. So a lot of these are surprises. But it is very cool that I get to have this worldwide audience really to see my comic there. And yeah, so the translation process has been going on for a while. It's been going very good. There's a lot of because it's a translation, but we also are localizing them slightly because there's a lot of cultural references, so the jokes don't work. So we've been, editing those, and I've been working very closely with them to kind of preserve the essence of it, and being like, hey, this is what the intention is, and also finding unique things because they're doing research on 1920s Brazil and France. So they've been able to find a lot of unique things that I would never been able to find. And they've, implemented it, certain slang words or, just things like that. And that's been really interesting just on my end to just be like, wow, I never would have knew that.
So how has the process been collaborating with other creators on on Poppy? Like I know you said you're the writer, creator, and artist mainly, but I know you've been working with I don't know, the variant cover artist. I don't know how to pronounce the name.
Oh, Kanan.
Kanan, yeah, Kanan, and then you have Leland, who I've interviewed before, editing, and then JL Collins. So how has it been collaborating with them on your work? Because I know you said mainly you do most of everything pretty much.
Yeah. So and there's many other names as well. Peter and his brother and a few others. Um, and all those guys I've met through the Okanagan Comics Workshop, Okanagan Comic Creators, which is a local group here in Kelowna. And like the name suggests, it's a workshop. So every week we come together, share what we've been working on, and we offer feedback and workshop it. So they've been very helpful in that front with, coming up with certain ideas or just refining the process and things like that. And then Kanan was very nice to offer to do a variant cover for the book, and I think he knocked it out of the park. I can't wait for everyone to see it. It's such a great cover that I'm really jealous I didn't come up with the idea for it myself, but he's been great. And yeah, Leland, like you mentioned, has been on here before, and he's been invaluable with helping me with the Kickstarter process because he's been through it a number of times. And this is my first one, So yeah, they've been very helpful every step of the way, even if they're not, directly doing work on the comic. Their presence around has been extraordinarily helpful.
So how has your Kickstarter experience been for the first time?
It's a lot of work. It is a lot of work, definitely. But it's very rewarding, and it's fun to implement everything and then see it kind of come together and come up with, all the ideas for, the book and the reward tiers and what we want to do for things like that. And seeing anytime we share it or tell people like, yeah, this is coming soon, and seeing them like how excited they get, like, oh yeah, make sure to let me know when it's out and I'll for sure back you. And it's a very positive experience in the end. So it's been really good.
Yeah. So what is some advice you could offer to other creators you wish someone would have told you when you first started? So it could be when you first started working in 2D animation, when you first started, working on your graphic novel, when you started working on the webcomic. I know you're getting help with your Kickstarter, but it's like, I wish somebody would have told me this when I first started, whatever it may be, even working with, translators and, internationally, right? So what advice could you offer to other creators you wish someone would have told you?
Probably the biggest thing, and it's especially with just making comics here, since it is a lot of work to make a comic, is don't shoot too big. Try to keep your ideas small for the first part. Like when I did my first graphic novel, I was like, oh yeah, this could go for like 60 issues. Oh yeah, I've got tons and tons of ideas. I made 6. and that was, it took me like 6 years to finish. So it was that was never going to happen. But just having that enough done, just finishing the first issue was like a milestone. So and then since then, yeah, I definitely toned it down to like, I've done a 32-page one shot. I've entered quite a few challenge things where it's you have 1 week to make a 4-page comic, and that's a really good exercise challenge. I would suggest for comic creators to try. It's just the smallest amount that you can tell a story, and make it manageable. And you do a lot of those, and each one, it gets better over time. And I think that's why I've been really enjoying the comic strip process, because I only have to do 4 panels at a time, and then I have a finished comic, right? So it's bite size. It's much more manageable. You look at the finished product right now, I think it's over 120 strips, and it's like, that's insane, but it's only done 4 at a time. It's much more manageable. So for those just starting out, like, yeah, just don't bite off more than you can chew. And one thing I've just learned, just as I've been in the creative world the last 10 years or whatever. It is a lot about connections, people you meet, like other artists or even just your readers, they can have a lot of input, and if they like your stuff and they'll share it, and you like their stuff, you share it, and you can kind of, build that sort of repertoire and this sort of little circle of creatives that you can share. So whenever you have your new project that's out and they know you, they can share it around, and it takes a long time to build that, but it's definitely worth building it up, because some of those connections can be for life.
Yeah. So I guess just to go back a little bit about how, when you were writing a certain topic, it was like really kind of sensitive in a way, and it was only like maybe 10 people reading, and then all of a sudden it became 1,000, within maybe a couple of days, couple of weeks, right when you were writing it. So how did you learn to trust yourself, not only as a creator, and even trust your readers that they could handle it? So how did you learn to trust yourself as a writer to be able to be confident enough to even, tackle something like this, and the fact that your readers could handle it?
Yeah, it was not simple. It was a lot of asking, my friends and the creative types, like, what do you think? What would you do? And a lot of them were like, you should be able to, like, go for it. And a couple were like, I would not blame you if you just trashed it and just didn't even go there. And I was like, okay. And the reason I wanted to tackle those kind of topics to begin with, rather than just make something like just, sugary and sweet and everything's fine, was that I think even family friendly ones can tackle that. Like, the biggest one for me was Calvin and Hobbes and the infamous raccoon storyline, where he finds the baby. I don't know if it was a baby, but it was a raccoon that's injured and sick, and he tries to take care of it, and it ends up dying, and he has to just sort of comes to terms with that. And so I thought, like, if you handle it well, like, you can do these different topics here. And part of it was also just originally when I was writing it, it was a little edgier, where I was just going to throw a lot of things in there that nowadays I'd be like, oh, Poppy would never do that, um, and things like that. And some of that you can still see at the beginning, because I thought, okay, that grit is kind of reflective of the modern world, where 1920s is all upbeat jazz age and all that, but the modern age people are just a lot more cynical and jaded, and I don't blame them at all, but we've been through, right? But I think that's why you need someone like Poppy, is just to just go like, yeah, things aren't as bad as they might seem, or you can get through it,
Yeah.
But in the end, just the kind of trust in that was just sort of like, I'm just gonna throw it out there, and I'm not even gonna read the comments. I'm just gonna keep going and try not to look back, and what happens. And I got I don't know, it worked out in the end, and I was very happy with that, and going, okay, all right, that was a tough one. I probably needed to do it, but now it's done, and since we've addressed it, I don't need to address it again, so that's the good part. And then someone in the comments was like, by the way, when are you going to tackle this subject? And I was like, oh, for goodness sakes. So yeah, but yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of leap of faith in the end, really.
Uh-huh. So outside of working on Poppy, the girl who slept in 100 years, how well do you find balance in your life? And how do you typically manage your mental well-being when you become stressed, frustrated, or overwhelmed?
Yeah. So when I created Poppy, I actually had done it during a 2-week vacation, and that sort of was the time that I had to just sort of, play around with ideas and stuff like that. And then by the time I got it going and was creating it, and I was back at work. I was working at Yeti Farm as an animator. And yeah, I wanted to get out like the first bunch rather quickly because I actually had a storyline idea I wanted to do by at the end of the year, and I didn't end up getting to do it that year. It'll probably end up being this year. But I was like, okay, how do I get this out quickly? Because I see most comics doing like a week at a time, but I'm only doing 4 panel strips. So if that was weekly, that's a very slow release schedule. So I was like, okay, we'll try the newspaper style of daily, but I'll take weekends off. It'll just be weekdays, or 5 strips a week. And it just so happened that the first couple arcs fit nicely into like, oh, I can get them out in a month, give or take a couple weeks. And I thought like, okay, well, I could like take a break after each month and just sort of do, monthly, every other month, but then within that month is daily. And so I was like, okay, I could probably keep that up at least to the end of the year, and then we'll see. Mm-hmm. And it was a lot of work. It was, working 8 hours a day in a studio, animating, and then going home and working another 4 to 5 hours on this comic strip that I have to get done, every day. It was a lot of work, but I don't know, giving myself that month to sort of build up enough, like a buffer, like I have enough strips finished that I can, take some time on some of the bigger ones, or even just take some days off, that sort of helped a lot. And then I think it was also a bit of like, since I had to work on something else, the animation, the show I was working on at the time, it was, I could change gears mentally to, okay, I've worked on animation a long time here. I'm going to go home and, oh, now I get to work on Poppy. Hey, that's something different. I'm excited for this now, So it's kind of if I just focus on one thing, for a long time, then you can easily get burnt out. But even just working a lot, if it's working on different things, it keeps it different enough.
You
and now
gears a little bit.
Yeah, switching focus at least a little. And but now this year, my contract with them ended last December. So this year I've been able to focus full time on Poppy, which, you do get a little bit of that burnout there. Okay, I've been, but it also helps to stagger the workflow. So I don't work on the same strip and finish it in one day. I'll rough it out, and then the next day I'll do the line art, and then the next day I'll do the color and finish it up and letter it, and so each day I rough one, like line art, color, and it's sort of like staggered for each strip. So every day one's getting done, one's getting colored, another one's getting, so it's still that shifting gears thing. It's just on the smaller scale of strip by strip basis. And then, so it's also the first time I've had to work from home. I was very lucky that during the last few years of COVID, I was still in studio. There was very few of us, maybe about a dozen or so in the whole studio. But I was at least able to go in and get out and, stay a bit sane. So yeah, working from home, that's been a new challenge for me, having to learn to, put away the distractions and all that, and just, hunker down and focus. But also, since it is pretty much the only thing I have to focus on for the most part. I mean, there's other things in life, but I am able to take a bit more time to do it and still hit my deadline. So, it's been all right. I've been hanging in there.
That's good. Well, is there anything else that you want to touch on about Poppy, the girl who slept in 100 years, that we may have missed as a whole, or maybe just discuss with readers for potential backers, like rewards? I'm sorry, for potential backers.
Yeah, we can talk about the Kickstarter a bit if you want. So yeah, that'll start on June 1st and it'll go to June 21st. So obviously the main thing we're doing is funding for the book as well as the translation. So it's a physical book. 75 pages, or sorry, 72 pages, 75 comics, as well as 10 pages of extras such as behind the scenes stuff, and bonus strips. Actually, never before seen comics are going to be in there exclusive to the book. So I highly recommend getting that. We'll have it available digitally as well as print. There'll be a variant cover by Kanan, and it will also be available in English, French, and Brazilian Portuguese. And there's some other goodies as well. If you really want it, you can obviously get it signed. You can get your name in the back of the book in the credits. If you support it, I don't remember the exact tier, but if you really want to help us out, you can get custom sketch cards commissioned that come with your book. And if you really, really, really love Poppy, there is a limited tier at the very top, $250, where you can be in the comic. So if you want to be a background character or an incidental character, then here's your opportunity. So you can look forward to that.
Oh, that sounds really cool. Well, are you attending any cons this year? And where can people find you online? I mean, obviously the webtoon, but like pretty much like what name is it under, and are you active on social media outside of that too?
Yeah, so the conventions, we're aiming to have it done in time for the Kelowna Comic-Con. That should be this August here in Kelowna. And last year I went to Pentacon, the comic convention in Penticton. I had a lot of fun, so I'll definitely want to be going back there. For social media, I'm on Twitter at Magooster14. I'm on Instagram at MatthewSenn95. You can find Poppy on Webtoon Canvas at webtoons.com under Poppy the Girl Who Slept in 100 Years, or you can search my creator profile at Magooster19. And if Webtoons isn't your cup of tea, then Poppy's also available on Tapis.io under the same name, same username. And if you want to check out the other work I've done, you can go to MatthewSenn.com, where I have all my animations, comics, artwork, anything I've done. And if it's not on there, you can find links to it.
Yep. All right. Well, again, I want to thank the creator and author of the webcomic Poppy, the Girl Who Slept in 100 Years, Matthew Senn, for joining us here today to promote the webcomic's upcoming Kickstarter. All of Matthew's socials and website will be listed in this episode's details alongside the Kickstarter link for those who are interested. Again, I'm KS Garner, and you've been listening to the Solo Nerdbird podcast. Thank you.
Thank you.